All right. Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon or good morning to those of you out in the Pacific time zone. My name is Jeremy Balsich, Director of Regulatory Affairs here at AAAE, and I want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar titled Simplify Part 139 Safety Compliance Through Enterprise Asset Management. I do have the privilege of being the moderator for today's session. But before we begin, I do have a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to get to. I did want to mention that the webinar today should take about an hour, and it does include a Q&A portion towards the end of the session. In order to keep the flow of the webinar going, all attendees will be on mute for the duration of today's presentation. At any point in the webinar today, we encourage folks to submit questions via the chat box, and our presenters will try to get to as many of those as possible with the remaining time that we do have for the Q&A. The webinar slides and recording, those will be available shortly after the conclusion of today's conversation. I have been told that the recording will be available at the end of the day via the AAAE Hub. And lastly, there will be a survey circulating at the conclusion of this call. And we really encourage all of you to complete that just so that we can receive feedback on how to improve these webinars for future sessions. So with that, let's get to introducing our speakers for today's webinar. First, we have John Green, who is the Director of Airport Solutions for Trimble's owner and public sector. With more than 20 years of aviation industry experience, John has served in various roles, including Aviation Business Development Manager, Aviation Program Project Manager, as well as Military Airfield Manager at several locations in the United States and internationally while on active duty in the United States Air Force. Joining John will be Ryan Butler. Ryan is the Technology Services Director at Woolpert. In this position, Ryan leads teams in designing and implementing best-in-practice asset management systems for a variety of government entities, including airports. His experiences include performing all aspects of asset management, software implementation, and related technology services, including airports. So with that, I will hand it over to our speakers today. And John, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. First off, I want to thank AAAE and Ryan from Woolpert for supporting this webinar today. I'd also like to thank all of you that have taken time out of your busy days to hear us speak. I really appreciate that. As Jeremy noted, I'm John Green, Director of Airport Solutions for Trimble. Today, I'm going to provide a brief overview of Trimble Asset Lifecycle Management Solutions, or ALM, as well as FAA Part 139 requirements and Enterprise Asset Management, which is a solution that Trimble provides through our CityWorks platform. I'll then hand it over to Ryan from Woolpert, where he's going to do a deep dive into safety management systems for airports and how our Trimble solutions can support that. Trimble is a technology company that has been providing innovative solutions for our customers for almost 50 years. We are market leaders in technology solutions for the construction, geospatial, transportation, and agricultural industries. We are a publicly traded company and have over 11,000 teammates worldwide, as well as about over 50 airport clients across the US and overseas. Our strength is providing solutions for overall asset lifecycle management, is what you can see on the screen there. We do that by supporting the complete lifecycle of an asset, from design, build, operate, and maintain phases of an asset. Our digital project delivery software, eBuilder, supports the design build phase, and our enterprise asset management software, CityWorks, supports the operate maintain phase. In the middle of that picture there, the Common Data Environment, or CDE, software that we have is Quadri and Connect. That is the hub that connects the two platforms of DPD, Digital Project Delivery, and EAM, Enterprise Asset Management. Airport leaders and their business partners have made do with legacy, paper-based processes and antiquated systems pieced together through disjointed workflows using multiple sources of often unreliable data. And it's no wonder that these outdated methods and technologies have dampened productivity and driven up costs. And this is why it's so important to digitize your asset lifecycle management efforts. Next slide, please. So why digitize asset lifecycle management? Well, the unified process of managing assets through the full lifecycle with our software improves efficiency and productivity while reducing waste and rework at every phase, so that projects can finish on time and on budget. In addition, this full lifecycle perspective enables a proactive and coordinated approach to asset maintenance with well-timed cost-saving preventative actions that reduce the need for expensive, disruptive major repairs. This approach also contributes to efficiency, safety, and compliance, which is essential for airport owners. Now is the time to implement technology to maintain your aging infrastructure and effectively manage the federal funding to support your projects and assets. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Actually, stay there, please. Go back, I'm sorry. So again, why ALM or asset lifecycle management is important for airports? Well, one, safety. As you all know, in this industry, safety is key and paramount to helping ensure that our passengers going through our airports are not being impacted negatively. The last thing we need is a mishap of any sort that's going to cause loss of life or injuries. It's also important to note that our aging infrastructure needs to be maintained, and not every asset that's on an airport is brand new. And so that's why it's important to have an asset lifecycle management solution in place to manage those assets. As well as compliance, which I'll get into next, the FAA Part 139 compliance. Compliance is key, and it's directly related to safety. And now that we have new funding coming down from the federal government, it's important to get ahead of these funds and implement solutions so that you can effectively manage projects through design build, and after they complete, operations and maintain phase. And we'll get into that later in the webinar today. Next slide, please. Now, asset lifecycle management is an essential piece in supporting FAA Part 139 compliance. Most of you on the call or the webinar may already have an understanding of FAA Part 139 compliance, but for those that don't, here's a quick overview. The Part 139 regulations set the standards for airport certification and operations, covering critical areas such as runway inspections, emergency response, wildlife management, and several other items. These standards are essential in maintaining a safe airport. Next slide, please. Now, achieving and maintaining compliance with Part 139 can be complex and demanding. Challenges include manual processes, siloed data, and limited visibility into asset conditions for all stakeholders working at the airport. These factors can lead to inefficiencies, increased costs, and potential safety risks. Trimble and our partners' goal is to reduce the challenges of compliance by helping airports implement enterprise asset management solutions, which again is one key component to asset lifecycle management. Next slide, please. Our enterprise asset management solution, CityWorks, integrates technology, processes, and people to optimize the management of an airport's assets and streamline compliance efforts. It enables real-time asset tracking, maintenance scheduling, data-driven decision-making, and overall safety management efforts, which Ryan will cover during this presentation. Next slide, please. Embracing enterprise asset management brings several benefits to simplifying Part 139 compliance. These include centralized data, all asset-related information located in one place, accessible to authorized personnel. Predictive maintenance, identifying maintenance needs before they become safety concerns. Automated workflows, streamlining inspection, scheduling, reporting, work order processing, and follow-up tasks. And as well as regulatory reporting, generating accurate and timely reports for the FAA audits when they come down for your Part 139 inspection. Next slide, please. Now, I like to mention this proactive versus reactive approach to enterprise asset management. I had to deal with, when I was a military airfield manager, I had to deal with this at an airfield that I was managing overseas. I was managing a dual runway airfield, and one of the runways was closed for major repairs for a few months. During a routine check of the open runway, the only open runway, we noticed that impression that you see there in the middle of the screen on the asphalt shoulder near the center of the runway. I had our engineers evaluate the problem, and they discovered an underground drainage pipe that had failed and caused erosion under the full width of the runway. We had to immediately close the runway and get it repaired. And that stopped all fixed wing operations for the airfield. And huge problem, as you can see. Now, if we had a digital system in place to help effectively manage our assets at that airfield, this problem could have been prevented. I like to mention that story because, you know, the impact of that airfield being closed was huge. We had to relocate aircraft. All the aircraft that were inbound had to divert to other locations, and we had no runway for several weeks, several months actually. And that's the last thing any airport needs is operational downtime. Because without our runways at the airport's basically a mall, a shopping mall. And so we definitely want to prevent that. You never know what potential problems could be lurking under your runways or taxiways, and that's why we're here to help. Next slide, please. So today I've covered Trimble's asset lifecycle management, the 139 compliance and challenges, and benefits of using our enterprise asset management solution, CityWorks. Now Ryan's up next, and he will cover the operate and maintain phase of asset lifecycle management with our CityWorks platform for airports, which supports safety management systems. You can click the next slide, so if you go. And I appreciate you all calling in today, and thank you. Over to you, Ryan.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. Okay, so like John, I wanted to thank everyone for their attendance today. I know everyone is busy with a lot of things on their plate, so certainly appreciate everyone spending a little bit of their afternoon or morning with Jonathan and I. So next slide, please. So what I want to cover today is more on the SMS component side of things. So we're going to look at, implementing Part 139 safety compliance, and we're going to look at it not after the introduction from a technology perspective. So what does it look like to start bringing this into whatever software system you are using now or could be using in the future, and how can that technology aid in helping you meet your compliance standards at the airport? So this bottom line up front where I wanted to summarize, I kind of wanted to give an introduction to this for those that may not be as familiar with SMS. So the FAA did finalize a rule requiring commercial airports to implement a safety management system over the next 5 years. We'll talk about that timeline in a couple slides. But this has been a rule that's been in the making for over 10 years that did get finalized this year. So the main goal is relatively simple, right? So our goal is to mitigate risks and avert accidents, right? So by identifying those hazards, how to mitigate those hazards once we find them and take care of them in a logical and reasonable way. Okay. So as far as timelines, like I said, we'll get into a little bit more detail, but airports have 12 to 24 months to submit an implementation plan, which we will get into. So that implementation plan isn't the full implementation of an SMS program, but just the plan itself, followed by 12 months to submit an ACM and 36 months to actually fully implement once the implementation plan has been approved by the FAA. Okay. And we're going to get into some examples today, but examples of programs implemented include, we're going to get into safety committees, self-inspections, enhanced training, and meticulous record keeping. And I have it bold and underlined for a reason because, just like other requirements at airports, this also has to contain meticulous record keeping as far as those hazards and what we're doing about those hazards. Next slide, please. So what is SMS? So those is not familiar with it or just know a little bit about it. Okay. So it is a collection of processes and procedures that ensure a formalized and proactive approach to system safety. Okay. So This does include repeatable processes, right? So making sure in our implementation plan, we have those repeatable processes built in that are structured, consistent, defendable, measurable, and data-driven, right? So by having a use of technology in your SMS program, it provides a mean to get that data-driven data right out of that system, right? SMS also where hazards are identified and risk measures implemented before an accident or incident occurs. So we're going to look at proactive management. So what we can do and how we document those potential risks ahead of time. And like I said, what we're doing about those. Okay. And so this SMS does apply to all movement and non-movement areas of an airfield. However, with that, an airport may choose to voluntarily implement SMS in other areas of the airport. It's just this requirement does apply to the movement and non-movement areas of a particular airfield. Next slide, please. So the four main components of SMS. So first in the top left, the safety policy. So establishing those safety objectives and the methods for the organizational structure. In the lower left, we talk about the risk management. So identifying those hazards, which I've mentioned, and the associated risks with airport operations. Safety insurance in the upper right. So ensuring the safety management system is functioning and it is functioning effectively. Okay. And then promoting safety. So that safety promotion is all about fostering an operating environment that emphasizes safety at the airport, right? So everything involves safety at the airport, and that should be at the forefront of everyone's mind when implementing a system. Next slide, please. Okay, and then you can click the next one as well, please. So on the left, we see the four different sections in here. So safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, safety promotion. So those are those four main components that we talked about on the previous slide. Why I have some of these highlighted in red is because technology can help with the three highlighted in red, right? So once you have that safety policy developed, the next thing on here, the safety risk management. Okay. So how can we identify those hazards? How are we documenting those hazards, right? That can go into a safety management system that is available, right? Documenting in there, what is the level of risk associated with those? Okay. And then with that level of risk, what are we doing to mitigate those risks when appropriate? Okay. Next bullet points, please. Can you move on to the next one? I think it might have skipped a couple slides. Okay, so the other ones on there. So the safety assurance before we get into who needs to implement an SMS. Yep, there we go. That's what I was looking for. The safety assurance. So providing a means for monitoring the safety performance through dashboards, through reporting, all can be exported and reported on directly out of a technology solution when implementing SMS. Okay. And what are the status of our mitigation efforts, right? What are the status of our hazards that have been identified? All can be rolled up into that safety assurance. Okay. Lastly, on the safety promotion side, so maintaining a record of all those safety orientation materials, all the documentation, making sure they're available to everyone at the airport, okay? And making sure everyone at the airport receives appropriate training and orientation about the SMS program that the airport is running, okay? So making sure we keep those training documentations recorded and making sure everyone receives the appropriate training at the airport. So technology can play a role into the majority of these four aspects and these four components of an implement or a safety management system. Okay, now next slide, please.
Ryan, there may be a delay. We're seeing the slide here.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just refresh.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. There must be a delay because I don't see it. There it is. So who needs to implement a safety management system? So it applies to approximately 265 airports. As of July 13th, 2023, it was 269 airports. So the three different types of airports that are required to implement an SMS. So Section A there, you see classified as a hub, a large, medium, or small hub. The second part in there are rolling average of 100,000 flight movements annually over a 3-year average. And then number 3 is handle international operations other than GA only traffic, right? And there is an asterisk next to that one. There are opportunities to apply for a waiver if you only qualify under number 3 there. I won't get into too much of those details, but that's certainly something that you want to look into. So in looking at these three kinds of airports that need to implement an SMS program, the FAA does estimate that it accounts for roughly 90% of all air passenger traffic, okay? And if you don't fall under one of these 3 categories, as I mentioned before, it doesn't mean you certainly can't implement SMS, always recommended. However, you're just not required to implement an SMS in your movement and non-movement areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the required timeline? So the full implementation and the implementation plan are 2 different things, okay? So the implementation plan, okay, so whether you qualified under number 1 there, which was a hub airport, so you need to submit your implementation plan before April 24th. The 100,000 flight operations before October 24th of next year. And then the final component of the international is on or before April 24th of 2025. Okay. So like I said, that's just the initial plan for submittal. That's not the actual implementation, which the next graphic shows very well from the FAA. An airport has no later than 36 months to fully implement this SMS program once the plan has been approved by the FAA. Next slide, please. So this graphic, I think, shows it very well. So that's why I included it in here. So the 12, the 18, and the 24 are for the initial implementation plan development. And in the next slides, we'll get into what is in that plan. The lighter blue next to that on the top, okay, is the ACM revision, and then the lighter blue underneath it is the months you have to complete a full SMS program implementation, right? So that's where I said at the beginning, you have up to 4 or 5 years to complete that implementation, depending on which category that you fall into. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is in the implementation plan? So these are some of the components. I won't read them verbatim here. The ones I have highlighted in yellow are where the aid of technology and the aid of implementing a technology system or a component could be very beneficial. Okay, so including the FAA airport, the system for identifying operational safety issues definitely comes into play. Okay, SMS specific training to employees, formal means for communicating important safety information comes into play as well. So, and the FAA does have examples on the implementation plan out there. Okay, so an airport can go out there and look at some of these, but I at least wanted to highlight a few of these in the PowerPoint here. But the FAA does have great documentation out there, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation on how an airport can get started going down this path of SMS. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've talked about some of the requirements, let's look at the technology, right? So CMMS uses, so computer maintenance management systems uses at airports. So there's lots of different uses. I'm not going to go through them all. So operations and maintenance, landside maintenance, ARF and lease space tracking and inventory management, permit and land and licensing. There's lots of different uses at airports for software, okay? Next slide, please. And with some of those CMMS uses at airports, there are also features at airports, and you can see highlighted second. You can click on the next graphic. you can see highlighted in these CMMS features is safety management solutions. Okay. So those being built directly in to a Part 139 or an asset management system, and one that actually includes a safety management solution inside of it, including the other things that an airport needs to do on a regular basis. SMS is just a component of that. Next slide, please. And the next one. Okay. And then you can click a couple more, please. So the included functionality. Okay. So these are some of the included functionality that a software solution can have baked in. So it can help you with things like a safety policy statement display. So making sure that's available and everyone can see that when they log into the system. Manuals and training manuals and making sure those are available. A system that captures training records. And then also, and this goes into the workflow that I have developed, the anonymous reporting of incidents. So you'll see in this workflow, okay, it has an initial hazard being reported, it going through an internal review, okay? So once that internal review happens inside the airport, okay, an airport can decide, is there risk mitigation needed, right? Is there a potential hazard here that we need to identify and correct, okay? So that can go into, if there is no risk mitigation identified and we deem something is not a risk, it goes right into documentation and closure. But if there is a risk, correcting that through a corrective maintenance work order, right? So what are we going to do to mitigate that risk and making sure that's documented and that work order is completed. And then it goes into a monitoring period to make sure that the the mitigation that we applied is actually working. And then, of course, everything flows to reporting and dashboards. Okay. So in addition to that, one more click, please. In addition to that, in the reporting and dashboards, we also see the predictive risks, also very important, right? So maybe somebody did not report on a problem yet or a potential safety hazard, but it's something that we're doing proactively, right? And making sure we identify those as well so that we can show that we are taking care of those predictive risks before they actually become a safety problem at the airport. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then, yep, one more as well. So I want to go into what it kind of can look like inside of a software system, right? So I'm going to go through those components of the workflow in the next several slides to show what it can look like, okay? So in this safety policy SMS manual, so when we log into a system, everyone sees very clearly that policy statement at the very top, okay? So it's communicated to everyone at the airport, and it's looking at them as soon as they log into a system, okay? As far as the SMS manuals on the right-hand part of the screen highlighted or boxed in red, we have some different reporting and dashboarding options, okay? Included in that are the safety incident portal, which will allow someone to anonymously and even someone outside the airport, just a passenger coming through, to report a safety concern, okay? But also at the top here, you'll see that safety policy statement, and then the one below it is the manual as well. So that goes back to how are we going to communicate our safety policy and how are we going to make sure that people have the necessary training. So even after they're trained, they have documentation of how things flow at the airport and how safety concerns are addressed in this manual. Next slide, please. Okay, and then one more as well. Perfect. So in the hazard reporting, so this is just an example of a form, okay? So a form being available on a website, being available for download on a mobile device, that when any tenants, any workers at the airport, or any passengers or members of the public that are going through the airport have a means to communicate anonymous safety concerns with the airport. So in these couple example screenshots, you'll see where, example fields of where, where the problem is, what it's been reported, where is the location, where is a problem. It allow you to take pictures as well of your safety concern. So obviously all very configurable depending on what an airport wants, but having this available and having it come into a safety management system is key. And that's what this is providing. Next slide, please. And then I believe one more. Perfect. So the internal review. Okay. So going back to our workflow, once an anonymous safety concern has been submitted, it goes into an internal review process. So this is this would be the software that's internal to the airport only. This is the software that an airport would be using to document their safety concerns and mitigation. Okay. So on the left-hand side of the screenshot here, okay, you'll see just added comments that came in as a part of the previous screenshot where someone could put in comments. And then at the very bottom, you'll see a picture of in this case, it would be a fuel spill, okay, on a movement or non-movement area. And those pictures come in and are able to be reviewed by the internal airport staff, okay? In the middle section there, okay, we have some of what we call custom fields. So these are fields that are configurable based on the airport. We certainly have best recommendations for implementing an SMS inside of a system like this, okay, where what is the result, the location, okay, the category, the number of people involved. All of these are completely configurable. But remember the early slide I had, the meticulous record keeping, it all comes back to this. We're able to easily select these in simple, easy to use drop downs, but then also be able to report on them and showing what we're doing to mitigate these safety concerns. And then the last screenshot on the right. So these are for aircraft event fields. Just something I wanted to briefly mention that. So for example, alert 123s, flight diversions, where's the airport or where's the aircraft coming from? Where is it originating? The weather, for example, what kind of make it is. We can include a lot of fields in a form like this, which then also can be reported on. Next slide, please. Okay, so the risk mitigation. So if you remember on the original workflow, right? So it came in from a member of the public, for example, if it's for a whole airport implementation, or if not, it's just created internally. If it's internal to the airport, it's reviewed. And then corrective action is taken off of that if it's deemed that there actually is something that needs to be corrected, right? And that's what you're looking at here. So on the right in that screenshot here, what you see is a work order, a corrective action to address the situation that came up with the safety concern. And while I have that highlighted and boxed in the lower right is you see it's tied to the original safety incident, right? So the safety incident came in, and then this is the related work order to address that problem. Okay. Next set of boxes, please. And then I think there's 3 more. Okay. Perfect. So in the custom fields, okay. So, when you're out there and you're correcting this safety concern, so what were the consequences of this? What were the severity of this? What were the mitigation measures? So what do we do to address this safety concern? Once again, all reportable and all goes into your reporting and your overall safety management system. Next slide, please. So really up until this point, we talked about the safety incidents that have come up, right? But what about those ones that I mentioned, those predictive ones that nobody has reported on, but we identify it as a safety concern, okay? So, and you can click the next 3 boxes, please. So over there on the right, the possible consequences, okay? So what this is looking at is what is the possible consequence, okay? What is the probability and what is the severity if this predictive risk, this proactive problem is not identified and is not taken care of ahead of time? What is the severity and the risks to the airport and the people involved at the airport? Okay. So in this case, it could be, a major probability, for example, right? And as you change those drop-down fields, the definitions change along with them. Okay. And then once those possible consequences, next screenshot, please. And then the mitigation measures along with it. Okay, so now that we've identified this proactively, this potential risk, what are we doing about it? right? So mitigation measure 1, mitigation measure 2, et cetera, and then the estimated completion date for those mitigation measures. Okay, next slide, please. So the system is not worth anything if we can't report on it in an effective manner. Okay, so this is an example of a dashboard that could be pulled up and reported on, all from the system that I showed you previously. Okay, so on the right in the map, that's a heat map of all the potential risks that have been identified and where they are. Okay, at the top of the screen, you'll see the number of incidents in this determined time frame, along with what was the result of those incidents, and then some other graphics, all configurable inside the dashboard here, where you can see, how many incidents by month, how much FOD has been reported, and then in the middle you also see a predictive risk matrix. So based on that previous screenshot where we identify the severity of something and the probability of something, it's automatically assigning a severity ranking to that, and that's where that number is coming in. Okay, so as a SMS manager, somebody who's responsible for safety, we can document this and have it in a dashboard that you can view anytime. Next slide, please. Okay, another example, this is just a dashboard. So when things come in, you can see the open incidents in there, the corrective action that are open. So the bottom line with this is there's visibility. So when things come into the system, when safety incidents get reported, they're very easily be able to be seen inside a dashboard like this. Next slide, please. And one more. So the one on the left is going to be just some metrics that are run directly inside the system. And an example screenshot on the right, this is a training report. So documenting all of your SMS training and as well as all your other Part 139 required training you have to do, inside this system. We're able to then report on it to show when that training was last done, what the training course was, and when it's up for recertification and training is going to be required again. Okay, next slide, please. So those are just some examples of what implementing an SMS can look like with the aid of technology. So how an airport can specifically get started, right? So an airport could have likely already started implementing an SMS. Okay, and if not, a good place to start is leveraging your existing program. So looking at your airfield inspections, looking at your wildlife inspections and getting started with what you already have, right? And identifying a person who is going to lead this charge. Okay, so who is going to be in charge of that safety action group that's going to lead this effort? Okay, and like I mentioned earlier, okay, the FAA has really good background and links to the final rule. Okay, and that can be seen from their SMS webpage that's readily available. Next slide, please. Okay, so continuing on with that, so certain products associated are eligible for SMS or a federal funding, including the development of an SMS manual and implementation plan, which that's the first step, right? Making sure that gets required by those 3 dates I talked about earlier. And then the procurement of an SMS software. So the software I showed you today is an example of that. Not only does it implement and it can be used for SMS, but it's also, that particular one is utilized for much more, right? So Part 139 requirements, landside maintenance, ARF, training records, vehicles and equipment maintenance, really more of an airport solution. But SMS is certainly a main component of that, okay? So FAA includes guidance on how to document your SMS, and like I said, it is available on their external website. An airport does not have to purchase or use a special SMS software. Okay, so you could implement this without any software at all. Okay, as long as it's documented meticulously. It's just with what I showed you before. It's just having that technology and being able to click, for lack of better words, an easy button to report on what's coming in, and having those workflows seamless is certainly going to make it easier. The FAA is not going to approve, just like a Part 139 solution, any specific SMS software. Okay, And then lastly, so third-party consultants can also assist with the implementation. So, for example, my side of things, we focus more on the technology side of things and how technology can help airports meet their requirements. But then also, assessing, other, like, we do as well as others, assessing those third-party consultants to help develop an SMS plan in general. Okay. I think last slide, please. Right. So kind of, Jonathan talked earlier from the Trimble side. I'm talking from the Wolpert slide. So, as you start to look, if you need outside help, right, finding those solutions, that are quick to value, right? So you get those clear roadmaps with quick wins, right? So if one of your quick wins is to develop an SMS program and make sure you meet the requirements, right? Making sure that you implement a system that has those capabilities to meet those requirements. Okay. Pre-configured software. So for example, a lot of the screenshots I showed you today are pre-configured software for SMS, right? That we already have pre-baked in and ready to go, obviously able to tweak based on an airport's requirements, but also, pre-baked software. And so that way you're focused more on change management versus product development in general. Okay. And then lastly on here, pre-drafted SOPs and manuals. Okay. So making sure that we have those SMS manuals, for example, for how to use a technology, documented. Okay. And making sure we have that role-based training manuals. And really what we're bringing there is just value to beyond the software, right? We're not just implementing a software, but we're also implementing the people side of that as well, and the expertise side of that. So with that, I think that was my last slide. So I will turn it back to Jeremy and appreciate everyone's attendance and time, certainly.
Yeah, John, Ryan, thank you very much for walking us through that great presentation. We do have about 17 minutes or so left for the webinar today. So we will move forward with the Q&A session. For the audience, if you haven't already, please consider throwing your questions into the chat. I developed a couple of questions myself just to try and get the conversation going. So we'll begin with that. This first one is for John. So for folks on the call, this is probably an easy one. But can you start out by going over what the consequences are if an airport is not maintaining Part 139 compliance?
Sure. Can you hear me? Audio's on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, great. So failure to maintain 139 compliance. So you can look at compliance and you can look at safety, right? Directly related to each other. In my opinion, the worst thing that could happen if you're not following 139 compliance is an accident, right? A safety mishap or an accident. That's the worst thing. It's not just about the maintaining compliance. You want to prevent, a mishap or a death or catastrophic failure of some sort. That's what I think is the key thing to think about here. Not just compliance, but reducing risk, reducing that safety implication. Another item that could be imposed if you don't maintain compliance are fines. So the FAA could send out a fine to the airport. Nobody wants to pay, millions of dollars of fines. It could get up to that realm. An airport could lose their operation certificate to operate, which means they're not going to generate any cash flow. Nobody's flying in or out of the airport. That's a big deal. You could potentially lose, an airport could potentially lose AIP, Airport Improvement Program funds for capital improvement projects, which is definitely not good. And also negative public attention. So if your airport is not maintaining compliance, all those things, the safety mishaps, fines, officer, certificate removal, and lack of funds is there, but that negative public attention, once the public finds out an airport authority is not maintaining compliance, to me, if I see that, I'll be concerned to fly in or out of that airport, and that's not what you want. And so the list goes on, but those are some key things that, in my opinion, that failure to maintain compliance directly relates to those. I think that sums that up.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. A lot of great examples there, so appreciate that. Next question, probably for both you and Ryan. What is the average timeline for a project like this to implement the asset management with a safety management system included for an airport? Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. I can go first, John, if you want. Feel free to add in. It's the fun answer of it depends, right? It depends on how much you want to implement, right? So if you're just looking to implement, SMS just on the technology side, right, that's relatively quickly, right? Could happen in several months. If you're looking to implement full-blown asset management, Part 139, safety management, landside maintenance, right? I mean, that could certainly be longer, right? That could be several months all the way up to a year, for example, right? So it really just depends, on how far an airport wants to take it. Many of our airports have done a phased implementation approach as well. So you don't need to, check off every single box, right, of what you want to do in the future, all in the first swipe, right? We can focus on meeting, in this case, the SMS requirements initially, because that's what's required, and then build upon that as we go and as you mature into a technology solution. So that would kind of be my answer. Jonathan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say that the size of the organization directly impacts the timeline of implementation. And so if you take an airport, let's say Tulsa, Oklahoma versus Atlanta, Georgia, obviously there's going to be some obstacles, different challenges compared from Tulsa to Atlanta. Atlanta's much larger, several stakeholders to be involved, and yes, it would probably take a little bit longer than Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I think, and it depends on what the customers want. If they just want just SMS, it might take a lot less time than a full asset management solution for an airport, which includes 139 management. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, certainly a lot of factors for an airport to consider. So appreciate that. This next question I will address from the audience. So 139 compliance and airfield surfaces are only one component. Can you speak to the ability of this type of platform to blend in traditional asset real estate from a seamless business tool?
Yeah.
You want me to take? You want to go?
Sure. You got it, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a great question. So I agree. The 139 and airfield surfaces is our only one component, and because we're focused on, this presentation was focused more on air, movement areas. That's where I gravitated towards, in the presentation. However, the software, the CityWorks software that I showed you today, is actually a traditional asset management software. That's what its bread and butter is, right? So the SMS is just a component of this, right? That software and others as well, helps you to maintain and implement, asset management programs, right? So looking at probabilities of failures, consequences of failures in your landside as well, your boilers, your chillers, your vehicles, right? That's what that software, it does, right? The 139 compliance and the SMS and the airfield services is only a component of it, right? And that software I showed you today even has something called a PLL, so permitting, land, and licensing component, where it blends in real estate, right? And the requirements and tenant leases and things like that, all into one software. So one of the big advantages of implementing a system like that is what you're doing is you're bringing, yes, SMS is obviously important, and without 139 compliance, there's no reason to exist for all intents and purposes. But those other aspects as well really need to be taken into account, and seamlessly blending that in. This is an entire airport business tool. This is not an SMS solution. It's not a 139 compliance solution. It is an airport solution that seamlessly blends all of those together without having to integrate 3, 4, 5 different software platforms across the board. John,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned the case of the failed drainage pipe under the runway. That's focused on the 139 airside issues, but of course our CityWorks platform can help airports manage landside, terminal, parking garages. Anything that is built in the airport environment is an asset that needs to be managed, right? And you want to reduce your total cost of ownership in the long run, and our platform supports that. And like I said, being proactive in managing your assets is key to saving costs and also maintaining a safe airport environment. And so yes, it's not just, our solutions are not just for 139 or SMS. It's several things that we can support, like Ryan said, permitting, leasing, licensing, all that. So the list goes on. And so what I would encourage the callers is to, if they want to hear more about our platform of solutions, please email us, reach out, and we will set up a demo to show you really what our platform of solutions can do.
Yeah, and just add one more thing onto that. So I went through it quickly for time purposes in the slides, but in the slides I have several of the components and departments at an airport that a system like this can touch on. It was a list of 2 different slides. So when you get the presentation, it's certainly in there, and we could also talk further along that as well.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we have a couple of other questions here, so appreciate everyone's engagement. The next question, on the topic of software integration, how do you integrate it with other SMS systems that tenants such as airlines may be using, relating to SMS DSR capability?
Yeah, so as far as how we integrate with other systems, the CityWorks and the Trimble platform softwares, not to get technical, but they have APIs available, which that means, what we do, on the Woolpert side is we integrate systems with Trimble software every single day of the week and every day of the year, right? So whether it's an SMS solution, it's a people management solution, whether it's a document management solution, whether it's a procurement system, a financial system, it doesn't matter, right? As long as those other systems are able to be integrated with and play nice, then Trimble software and CityWorks specifically has the ability to integrate with those other solutions. So, how do you integrate it? It's just part of our process, right? Developing the requirements, developing of the workflows, and how that data, in this case, would pass between an external SMS solution and a Trimble software and CityWorks, and then developing and testing and deploying the integration. So that's kind of, the process that we would take.
Awesome. Great. Next question, how do you manage the assets on the land side with this software? And then I believe this is a follow-up question to that. Is it web-based?
So web-based I'll handle quickly. It is web-based. It works in a connected and disconnected environment. So if you happen, I had one airport I worked with that didn't have great connectivity on certain parts of the airfield. So it didn't deem to be a problem because it does work in a disconnected environment. But yes, it is web-based, is a short answer to that. So the other question, how do you manage assets on the land side? That's a very good question, right? And so one of the unique things about the software that we're talking about here is it is a GIS-centric solution, right? So what do we mean by that? So all of the assets, whether it's an airfield light, pavement, vehicle, mower, chiller, boiler, whatever, right, are all GIS. They're all stored in Esri's GIS software, okay? So when you're creating work orders, inspections, et cetera, inside the solution, you're creating it against specific GIS assets. CityWorks does not duplicate that asset list in the CMMS solution, okay? So how we manage landside assets, so they're all managed, or all those assets are available and managed inside of Esri. So we've had airports that have created work activities, inspections that are created and attached to a building footprint, right? And we have on the other end, right? Where we have airports that are able to turn on and off floor plans, see all their assets in the floor plans from a mapping component, right? And be able to really drill down and see those assets. And a very exciting thing as well is with the latest technology of 3D, right? We're now able to incorporate Esri's 3D technology into CityWorks as well. So you're actually able to look in 3D at a map, select a boiler, a chiller, an HVAC unit, whatever, and create a work order all from one screen and one solution, right? So we manage those assets all in Esri. To what level of granularity depends on what the goals of the airport for, and where the airport eventually sees themselves going. But that's an excellent question.
Yeah, and I'd like to mention too that CityWorks, our enterprise asset management solution, and Esri are directly linked to each other. CityWorks cannot operate without the Esri connection. Well, it could, but it wouldn't be as effective. And I would like to throw this out there that if your data is already in Esri, your GIS data, getting CityWorks up and running will be very quick because you don't have to duplicate the effort to get the data into CityWorks that you've already captured in Esri. With the other platforms out there that do asset management, you have to duplicate all that effort that you did for data capture for your GIS efforts. And so the timeline is definitely a lot longer than if you are going with those solutions out there. CityWorks, you're going to be up and running quickly because of that direct link with Esri. So we've got a couple minutes left here.
Awesome. Looks like we have about 3 minutes left. We'll try to get to all of the questions we have remaining. This is a good one. I hear this at times helping to manage our General Aviation Airports Committee meeting. So I think it applies to the similar demographic. But do you both predict the SMS rule rolling out to non-hub airports considering the generally lower levels of risk? Any thoughts there?
That's a tough one. In my opinion, I think it will eventually. When we say levels of risk, right, at an airport, a commercial 139 airport, of course, there's more people, more throughput, more potential for an accident to happen, right? And so, of course, the federal government's going to impose that rulemaking to make sure that we're saving lives. And to say that a general aviation airport is not as important, I disagree with that. Safety at a GA airport is crucial as well. Just because it's smaller aircraft and less people doesn't mean is less important, in my opinion. So I think it will come down eventually. And we're here to support those airports that need that solution.
Right. And the only thing I would add on to that is the solution, that I showed, will work obviously very well at a GA airport, echoing what Jonathan said. And when the FAA, if and when the FAA does go down that path to requiring it at GA airports, right? Like I said in the presentation, it's still the recommendation, even if you're not required to start going down that path and start that implementation approach, right? So you're ahead of the curve on that, right? But we've implemented products, the one I showed you today, from one of the, some of the country's largest airports down to GA airports and everything in between, right? So just because it's not a large hub or a medium or large size airports, it's still relevant, obviously for GA airports, and we're talking with several right now about how we can incorporate not just the SMS component, but the asset management component as well, that Jonathan referred to.
Yep, totally agree with both of your answers. So I know we have about a minute left, so just curious to see if both Ryan and John, if you had any closing comments for the audience today.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, thank you everybody for calling in. We really appreciate it. I want to, highlight the partnership that Trimble and Woolpert has. It's very strong in aviation and it's continuing to grow, as well as we have several other partners out there to support your efforts. I would like to mention asset lifecycle management. A key benefit of our solutions is you could have one vendor software agreement for multiple solutions to support your airport, from digital project delivery, eBuilder, Enterprise Asset Management, CityWorks, Quadri, and Connect for your common data environment. I'd also like to mention that the 2023 FAA reauthorization bill was passed by the House a few weeks ago. I think it's with the Senate now. And in there, it provides verbiage for funding, AIP funding for software solutions such as the ones we've discussed today. It's not approved yet, but it's coming. And so if your airport doesn't have the funds to support purchase of this stuff, eventually it's going to be approved for federal funding. And lastly, Ryan and I, as well as Jeremy, will be at the AAAE Airport Ops and Technology Symposium in Atlanta here in a few weeks. If you're interested in meeting in person, we'll be there to discuss potentials to help your airport. And I want to thank you all for calling in today.
Yep. The only thing I'd say is thanks, everyone. Appreciate the attendance and echo John's thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, John. That was a great plug for our Operations and Technology Symposium that we are hosting in a couple of weeks. Ryan will be presenting on the 4th plenary session, which is scheduled for Thursday, August 24th. So look forward to catching up with Ryan then. I know we're about a minute over, but just wanted to say, we'd like to thank all of you for participating in today's webinar. I think it was a great session. Thank you to both John and Ryan for spending some time with us today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the slides, as well as this recording, will be available on the AAAE Hub by the end of today. We also encourage folks to complete the survey that will be distributed to all registrants so that we can ultimately improve these webinars for the future. So thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and stay tuned for additional webinars that AAAE has planned for the next couple of months. They should be great. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.